Hi there. In this slideshow, we're going to be thinking about early advertising leading up through the end of the 19th century, really, and actually maybe looking at some things that we might not actually immediately recognize as advertising. But it's important in this to think about and to recognize how advertising in these different kind of basic ways is a part of American culture from its very beginning. And if we look at this and we think about it, the reality is that this is a place, America, where people had to be persuaded or have reasons to come here. And so that created a way in which we would have things like handbills and posters that were promising and inviting people and offering them a whole new way of life. And the key is that looking in this stuff, we can see how, again, there's a concrete thing that's being offered, a product or property, and then there's the more abstract things that we're going to get with that, like happiness, security, and so forth. So one of the places you really see this is in the bills that were used to, like I said, entice people to come and settle particular areas. This is one in Georgia that is telling people about how great the land is and how fertile it is and how good it is for growing things and so forth. And it's also communicating how they want a few first-class families to complete it, that you're going to have these quote-unquote, first-class quality people that are going to be a part of your community as well. And in this unit on early ads, I've included a couple images that here they're way too small for you to see, but they are from a handbill that was circulated in England to get people to come to South Texas. And I think you will enjoy hearing how great they make South Texas sound in this thing. So that's one of the things you'll be doing in the discussion forums, is reading that and talking about how South Texas is being sold, how this person is trying to persuade people to come to South Texas. Now, on the other side of things, though, we have to recognize that America and the founding America was not just about persuading people for why they should want to come here. And if we go back and we look at the earliest ads, some of them are actually for people. And it's true that some of the earliest notices that were in newspapers would simply be lines selling property and also lines selling slaves. So here again you can see these are basic putting together of images and text telling us that this is another kind of property that has arrived and that is available for purchase. And even in this one on the left, it's talking about there will be nothing misrepresented in what he's talking about and what he's promising to provide. And when you look at these things, I think it's pretty chilling to recognize that this is very much a part of advertising history as well. This is American history and this is advertising history too. The idea that people are going to be something that can be sold and purchased and is going to, in many ways, make possible the kind of consumer culture and the kind of economy that existed beginning in the 19th century and going on into our present. Okay, so what's going on in the 19th century that is really, of course, vital, essential to the rise of our own consumer culture and why there weren't lots of advertising prior to this era is the Industrial Revolution. And that is this massive shift that takes place culturally, not just producing products and how people buy things and how things are made, but where people live. And in America, that means a shift from rural and small towns to more people living in big cities. Okay, but what is it that happens in the Industrial Revolution that makes consumer culture and advertising possible and even necessary? Well, one is, importantly, that it is going to become cheaper to actually buy products than make them yourself. People are going to start having money that they can spend on things, and it makes more sense to buy them rather than make them their own. If they're working outside of the house, if they're working in a factory, that time spent working at their job is going to provide them with money that they can go and buy things that they don't have the time to make on their own. The Industrial Revolution, of course, is also all about the mechanics of how things are made and power and how things are assembled and put together. So you have things like the use of steam power and interchangeable parts and assembly lines that really allow mass production, right? And the assembly and the production of products on a scale that hasn't been possible before. Also going on at this time is that the cost of shipping goods across the country decreases. So that means it's going to be easier to get goods in places that we couldn't before. It's also going to be easier to get the resources to build goods. There's going to be new markets opening up for things, and it's going to be cheaper to get them there as well. So all this stuff is going on because of the Industrial Revolution, and is going to have such a profound impact on people's lives. Now, aside from this, in the 19th century here in the U.S., we also have the Civil War, and that is taking place really smack dab in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. And particularly, there are some things that develop because of the Civil War that have an influence on consumer culture. There's a first national advertising campaign that has to do with raising war bonds to fund the Union war effort. And also, a lot of work goes into figuring out how to package goods, how to package food, how to can things so it can be transported long distances to soldiers who are fighting and not be spoiled, right? And so these things are going to then become consumer goods after the war. We're going to know how to make goods and package goods that can then be sold to, citizens outside the military, outside the war environment. Another thing that goes on is that while so many men are actually fighting in the Civil War, women have to do increasingly jobs that men were doing previously, right? And one of the effects of that is that they may be making money that gives them this disposable income to spend on things. They also, again, don't have time to buy things like soap, which is the first word in one of our books, Soap, Sex, and Cigarettes. They don't have time to buy the things that they previously made themselves. And they don't have time to make them, and they can buy them a lot cheaper, right? So in this process following the Civil War, what we see is that women increasingly become the consumers. They are the ones who are going to assume the responsibilities for what's going to be purchased for their home and how much is going to be to buy. And that is very important, and that is going to stay true up through the 20th century. Women are going to be the primary consumers, and it's something to keep in mind when you're looking at ads. They are, for household goods especially, their imagined viewer, their imagined consumer is not a man, it's a female. Women are expected to be the consumers. Okay, other developments after the Civil War. We have a couple different venues that developed that have to do with mass circulated popular culture, right? These are things like penny papers and magazines. Penny papers were called penny papers because they were so cheap. They just cost a penny. There have been papers before this. They were more expensive. They relied on subscriptions to sustain themselves. Penny papers, however, relied on advertising, placement of advertising. That's how they're going to be funded, and that's what's going to allow them to be so cheap. We also have the rise of magazines, which might have more content, be thicker, and have more in them, more material in them, and have different kinds of ads as well. So we're having the rise post-Civil War of print advertising because of these kinds of mass publications. And you're not just going to be, as an advertiser, placing an ad in a newspaper in one locale. You're going to start to need to be across areas, right, in different forms of media. And so what we have is that the advertising agency really begins to take shape, right? And we have what's known as the advertising agent, who's going to be this individual that's going to work for a firm, decide where ads ought to be placed, how much they should cost, where they're going to go in, design what those things are going to look like, right? And then also, some newspapers start paying agents to turn around and sell their ad space for them, so they don't have to worry about selling advertisement themselves, right? And then another model that develops, which is really the way that many advertising agencies work today, is that agents are going to go ahead and buy the space in these newspapers, and then they're going to turn around and sell them to advertisers themselves at a profit, knowing who to go to and how to do that. Okay, so those are some of the big kind of shifts and developments that are taking place. We're going to pause now, and when we come back, we're going to look at one particular case in early ads.